A very good morning to all. Today, moving on to the new topic that is about separation of solids from liquids. In the last class, we discussed about separation of solids, and I hope you all remember the different methods for separation of solids. So today, let's see the methods of separating insoluble solids from liquids. So what is the meaning of insoluble substances? The substances that do not dissolve in water. We call it as insoluble substances. So let's discuss about the methods for separating insoluble solids from liquids. So these are the following methods. So which are they? The first one is sedimentation, then decantation, then filtration, and the last one is loading. So which are the different methods? The first one is sedimentation, then decantation, then filtration and loading. So let's discuss each of these methods one by one. So which is the first one? The first one is sedimentation. So let me explain to you with this an example. So here you can see the muddy water. So you can take a beaker or a container containing water and into that add a spoonful of mud. Okay, you can add a teaspoon of mud. So then you will get a mixture of water and mud. So you have to keep this mixture undisturbed for some time. And after some time, that is, let it be after 10 minutes or a half an hour. So after this, you can see the heavier particles get settled down at the bottom and water on top of it. So as you can see the picture here, this is a mixture of mud and water. So see, the mud got settled down at the bottom and you can see the clear water on top of it. Right. So what do we call for the undissolved particle that is at the bottom? That is called as the sediment. What it is? It is called as the sediment. Here, mud is the sediment that gets settled down at the bottom. And you can see the clear water on top of it. So that process we call it as sedimentation. So what is sedimentation? Sedimentation means it is the separation of undissolved particles from a liquid. So that is sedimentation. So let me explain to you the process once more. Here you can see the mixture of mud and water. And if you keep this mixture left undisturbed for some times, after some times you can see the heavier particles get settled down at the bottom and the water on top of it. So the process of separation of undissolved particles from liquid, that process we call it as sedimentation. And what do we call for the undissolved particles at the bottom? That is called as the sediment. Here the sediment is the mud. So that process of separation of undissolved particles from a liquid, we call it as sedimentation. So this is the first method for separating insoluble solids from liquid. So moving to the second method. Which is the second method? That is decantation. So do you know what is the meaning of decant? Decant means to pour off liquid from one container to another container without disturbing the sediments. So here you can see the picture. So here you can see this is a mixture of water and sand. And if you keep this mixture for some time, if you keep this mixture left undisturbed for some time, what you can see? You can see the heavier particles get settled down at the bottom. And you can see water on top of it. So here you can see the sand got settled down at the bottom and water on top of it. So now what we are going to do? Now we are going to apply the decantation method. So that is the liquid water above the sediment, we are going to pour it from one container to another container without disturbing the sediments. Here you can see the water is poured from one container to another container without disturbing the sediments. And here we got the clear water. So this is how decantation method is done. So what is decantation? The liquid water above the sediment is poured into another container without disturbing the sediments. That method we call it as decantation. Pouring of water into another container without disturbing the sediments. So what it is? That method is called as decantation. So we first discussed which method? The sedimentation. Then the second one is decantation. Then moving to the next one, that is filtration. So filtration is a process that is used to separate insoluble particles from liquid. And it is done by using a device called filter. Understood? So what is filtration? It is a process of separating insoluble particles. You all know what is the meaning of insoluble particles, the particles that do not dissolve in water. So it is a process of separating insoluble particles from liquids by using a device called filter. So here we have a mixture of water and sand. Then here we have a filter funnel and a filter paper that is kept in the filter funnel. So now what are we going to do is we are going to pour this mixture of water and sand into this filter funnel, and then you will get the filtrate. So that is the pure water, and the residue will be there on top of it. So you will get the clear water, the undissolved, that is the insoluble particles get separated from liquid, and you will get a clean water, you will get pure water. So that is the method filtration. So a filtering device can be a fine piece of cloth to filter water, or we use a special paper in order to filter liquids in laboratory. So here, in order to filter, you can either use a filter paper or you can use a fine cloth in order to filter the insoluble solids from liquids. The next important thing is the size of the pores of a filter depends on the size of the solid that is needed to be separated. Let me give you an example. You all have seen a strainer that we use to filter tea, right? So that strainer will have large pores, right, for filtering tea. So which means the size of the pores of a filter, it depends on the size of the solid that is needed to be separated. So that is about the method filtration. So what is filtration? It is a process of separating insoluble solids from liquids. And it is done using a device called filter. So which is the first method that we discussed? That is about sedimentation. Then comes decantation, and which is the third one, that is filtration. Now you have an activity in page number 56. So you all can take page number 56. Let me explain to you this activity. So for that we need to have two beakers. So as you can see in the picture, there are two beakers. So in the first beaker, you need to mix sand and water. Sand and water to be mixed in the first beaker. Then what about in the second beaker? You have to mix salt and water. In the first beaker, you need a mixture of water and sand. In the second beaker, you need to have a mixture of salt and water. Then, now filter both these mixtures separately by using a filter paper or a piece of newspaper. So using a filter paper or using a newspaper, you can filter this. Okay. Then, there are three questions given. The first one is, which container has a water-soluble substance? So what is the meaning of soluble substances? The substances that dissolve in water. So you have to find out which container has water-soluble substances. The second question is, in which case you are not able to separate what has been mixed. So you have to find out from which beaker you are not able to separate the mixtures. Then the third one, does filtration separate substances dissolved in water? So these are the 3 questions. So you can try doing this activity and try to tick the right answers for the following questions. So I hope this class was clear to you. We were discussing about the methods of separation of insoluble solids from liquids. So we'll be discussing the rest of the topics in the next class. Till then, thank you.